My last video was about changing strings on the guitar, and it was only when I was editing the video to get it ready to upload online that I noticed a couple of things that I made a note of and wanted to just mention in a follow-up video. The first thing, it ended up being a really long video, just completely by accident. I didn't realise how long it was, so I'm going to try and keep this one short and sweet. That's by the by. The second thing was that I didn't talk about something that's quite important, and I do get asked, is how often we should be changing the strings. I went through the details of the process and some of the things that I do to simplify it, but in terms of how frequently you need to be changing the strings, that's something I didn't really mention, so I'm going to do that now. There's no right and wrong answer. I can't tell you to change them every 2 days or every 6 weeks or something like that. It depends on how you're playing, the type of playing you're doing, and various other factors. So I'm going to look at a few different scenarios and how the frequency of changing the strings might be different for different people in different circumstances. So to start with, if you're at the top of the tree, if you're a professional musician, a rock star, if you do it for a living, if you're out on tour going around the world playing 4 or 5 plus gigs every week for a few hours at a time, and your guitar's getting a lot of hammer, those people probably have new strings on for each performance, for each concert. That's fine. They're probably not paying for the strings. Either they'll be sponsored, or the record company might be paying for the strings, or they might just be successful enough that the cost of strings just doesn't bother them. But as I said, my strings cost me about £7, so there's no realistic way I'd want to be replacing them every day just for the sake of it. But at that level, the cost isn't so much of a consideration. Also, the time for changing the strings, if you're a professional touring working musician and you're lucky, there's a good chance that you'll have your own personal technician, guitar technician, who'll do all that stuff for you. So you just basically turn up at your rehearsal studio, you turn up at the concert venue, wherever you're going to do the gig, you do your hair if you've got some, and whatever else you need to do, sort your clothes out. Your guitar technician will hand you a guitar of your choice that is restrung, set up, clean, beautiful, ready to go. So all you need to do is walk up the steps onto the stage and start playing. So that's one end of the spectrum. That's not something I've ever experienced. It's obviously, if you're young and start playing, it's quite often a dream for a lot of people, and why not? Somebody's got to make it up to that level, but that's not going to be for everybody. So for the reasons of cost and for the reasons of time, that's probably not something that's realistic for most of us. As well as playing live, these professional musicians, that they record in the studio as well, so they're going to create an album, a CD or whatever, or they put the music out on the internet nowadays, however they want to do that. But one of the things, if you do ever get into a situation where you're going to do a recording, you want to try and firstly get your best sound. So as I did mention in the other video, the new strings are always going to sound better than the old strings. So it's a good idea that if you're going to ever record yourself at whatever level, even if it's for a fun garage band, or if it's just a little project you want to put a composition of your own together, it's something worth thinking about, because once you've recorded it, it's there, and it's better to get a good sound down to start with than try and fix it later, because you're just not going to get the same results. So as well as the playing live, if you're going to record yourself, then that might be something to think about, changing the strings. As I've mentioned, I think I've mentioned in some of my other videos, I've never been a professional musician at that level. I have played in bands where we've been quite a busy gigging schedule. So that, to me, that the busiest I've ever been is probably doing a couple of gigs a week. They might be on consecutive nights, Friday, Saturday. There might be a space between them. In addition to that, I will have had maybe 2 or 3 full band rehearsals during the course of the week in between that, as well as my personal practice. At that level, when I was as busy as that, myself personally, I was probably replacing the strings about once every 2 weeks. So that would maybe be 3 or 4 gigs, or so on and so forth. One of the things to remember if you're playing live is that you're obviously going to play the same piece that you were practicing in your bedroom or in your living room or whatever, so there's nothing different there. But you get, and it's unavoidable, a sense of adrenaline. You tend to, certainly if you're not a professional musician, if you only do it occasionally like I did, you get an extra, you tend to put a little bit more energy in, because you've got a little bit of tension, certainly in the start of the show, when you know, just getting over that little bit of stage fright and you're a little bit tenser, so you're going to be working the instrument a bit harder. Not only that, for the same reason, you're probably going to be sweating quite a bit as well, particularly if you're in a pub or a club or somewhere, or especially if you've got these lights, stage lights down on you. If you've never been stood underneath a stage light, it's like being in a sun tanning room. Well, I've never actually been in a sun tanning room, but I imagine that's what it's like. It's literally like the sun beating down on you. And I've been in a situation where I can't see because I've been sweating off, and obviously it's not a very nice picture to think about, I do apologise, but the sweat from my hands on the strings, that's one of the things that's going to corrode the strings pretty quickly. So, you know, if you're doing that, another tip I'll give you is to make sure that you clean your strings off after you've sweated all over them, because they're just going to last a bit longer. So we've gone down from a professional musician to someone who's just doing it for fun but quite busy and using the guitar quite a lot. If you're not playing live, or if you're not playing with a band, even if you're not doing gigs, if you're playing with a band, your guitar might be getting a bit more hammered, because psychologically you might be thinking, well, I've got to keep up with the drummer in terms of volume and things like that. Your amplifier should be doing that for you, but you do get carried away. Sometimes you end up playing a bit faster together because you get that camaraderie between yourselves. It's happened to me loads of times. So that's going to have a bit more wear and tear on your string. That aside, if you're just playing at home for your own enjoyment, or you meet up with your mate every now and again and have a little bit of a jam together, your strings aren't going to get hammered as much, so you're probably not going to need to be changing them as frequently as that. And then it just comes down to the case of, well, obviously the strings are going to sound worse and worse and worse over time. So once it gets to a point where you're not happy with the sound of the strings, or you think, oh, these are starting to sound a little bit dull, then you will notice if you listen out. Again, on the previous video, I did say I did a little bit of a boo-boo. What I wish I'd have done with hindsight is do a recording of the old strings, even if it was just a sound recording, and then do a recording of the new strings so you can hear the difference. But you could do the same if you find yourself wanting to change your strings, or just want to see what the comparison's like. Just do a little audio recording on your phone with your old strings, and then when you put your new strings on, compare what they sound like, and you will be able to hear the difference. The new strings always sound better. As well as sounding better, the new strings are going to be more consistent in tuning, and they're going to be less likely to break because they've not had the wear and tear. So that's when you might choose to change your strings. A step down from there is when you're going to be forced to change your strings. The most common example of that is if you break a string. You obviously can't play with a broken string. You can't fix a broken string. So the only solution is to change at least that string so that you can play the instrument again. Now, depending on how long you've had the strings, the full set of strings on your guitar to begin with, so let's say for example I've just changed these strings a couple of days ago, 3 days ago, I stretched them in, I've just gotten to the point now where the tuning's stable and they should be good to go for a while. If I accidentally break one of these strings, I'll have to change it, but I can replace it with a brand new string and they will sound consistent and the same. If I was playing on my old strings, which had been on the guitar for quite a while, quite a few months I think actually, so they'd been on a long time, and then I broke a string and replaced it with a new string, remember what I said about the new string sounding brighter, sharper, more pleasant? The one new string will probably stand out and sound a little bit different compared to the old existing string. So if I just break one string, replace that, that's going to have a better sound and a better tone than the 5 remaining strings on the guitar. So depending on how old the set of strings were when I happened to break a string, I might want to make a decision whether it's worth doing what I've just done and replace all the strings so that at least the guitar is going to sound consistent when I've finished restringing it. just a little grey area in between that. I didn't change the strings because of breakage. The reason that I decided to change the strings at the time when I did was the fact that one of the strings, in this case it was my third string, my G string, that I was noticing a bit of tuning instability on that. What I mean by tuning instability was I tune the guitar, everything sounds fine, it's in tune down here, the intonation's good, everything's as it should be. Then I play it for a little bit and then my string for some reason has gone out of tune. So I retune it, just play it a little bit more, it's gone out of tune again. It's something you can hear once you get used to what the strings pitches should sound like. Obviously you can check it with your tuner if your hearing pitch isn't quite up to that stage yet. So that gave me a bit of a problem. I'm thinking, well, I can't keep doing this, and from my experience I know that's an indication, that's a little warning flag to say that these strings are getting a bit tired. The next thing would have been a string breakage if I'd have just carried on playing those strings. It might have been the G string, it might have been another one, but the fact that that string wasn't staying in tune nicely and was not behaving itself was telling me that those strings are tired and they probably wanted changing. I don't know if you noticed on my restringing video, in the process of actually just removing the strings, my high E string snapped just whilst I was taking the tension off on the peg. So there's a good chance that that string would have broken sometime in the very near future if I hadn't changed the strings at that point. There's no way of knowing when they're going to break, they don't have a timer on them or anything like that. But by if you start getting the strings not staying in tune when they were previously, and everything was fine previously, but all of a sudden or gradually it gets to the stage where they're not staying in tune, then that might be a good indication that you want to change the set, because they're going to be tired, and the next thing you'll get is breakage. So from changing them every day for a professional musician to changing them just when you break them, it's up to you at whatever usage level of the instrument you're playing at and whatever you're comfortable with. So take from that as much information as you can. Any questions about it, as ever, in the comments below. I'll put a link to my string changing video if you haven't seen that one and you need a little bit of help getting to sleep, because it is a long one and it's a bit of a waffly one. So I'm going to try and be aware of the video length going forward.